So for 23 years, I've been doing my physical therapy. I did learn how to walk again, and I'm out there in the world. But the one thing that helps my pain more than anything else is medical marijuana.
Great, because for people like me, which I'm dealing with all kind of other health issues, I don't want to have another health issue come from my medicine. So it's great that now the technology has been that you can get it.
It depends on what works for you. It worked for me. It worked like a clock. If I smoked it, it always was the same. 2 hours later, I had to eat. I couldn't eat. I weighed 125 pounds, 120. I went down to 85 pounds at that time. And later I had to use it for pain. I was on morphine. I was on Dilaudid. I mean, it was totally unnecessary.
Breast cancer kills more than 41,000 American women every year. Researchers in the San Francisco lab are working to shrink that number, and they're doing it with an unusual weapon, marijuana, or at least a compound from it.
And what we found is that this compound called cannabidiol was particularly effective at inhibiting aggressive breast cancer.
General Hospital, we had a volunteer, Mary Rathbun, who was our volunteer of the year for 2 years in a row. She was an older woman, and she used to bring her kids, as she called our patients, marijuana brownies. This was at a time when we didn't have any effective therapies for HIV/AIDS, and many people were dying of the so-called wasting syndrome. I was in Amsterdam, of all places, at the International AIDS Conference, and glancing at CNN headline news, and I saw that Mary was being arrested in Sonoma for baking brownies for our patients. And when I arrived home, there was a letter directed to the director of research in the AIDS program at San Francisco General, suggesting that a clinical trial showing the benefits of medical marijuana should come from Brownie Mary's institution.
Councilmember Lurch. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Procedural we'll go into first. I am not sure why we're here with a whole new version of the medical marijuana ordinance. We have an ordinance on the floor that was approved by the majority of this council, and that's the ordinance that we should be in a second reading. On February the 9th or February the 2nd, this council, 5 votes. And what we have in front of us now is something that the city attorney, and no disrespect, Mr. City Attorney, has decided to throw out the vote of this council and the ordinance on the floor and make a whole new ordinance. We have an ordinance on the floor. It was passed on the 2nd of February. On the 9th of February, this council withdrew any action on it, and I'm not sure where this new direction has come from, because we have a direction for the city council. Mr. Shannon, again, no disrespect, but February 2nd, the notice was the second reading on the ordinance passed by this council.
Well, I don't want to argue with you. You're going to give first reading to an ordinance, whatever you choose. I will then determine whether or not this ordinance is legal, and then I'll determine whether or not I'm going to draw the ordinance up. So you go ahead. I'm not going to argue the law with you, Mr. Lurch.
Well, that's what we're
to me again, please.
No, I've already explained it.
I would like you to explain to me again.
No, I've already explained it.
No, this is enough.
Patients and the primary caregiver must reside in the same city or county.
Now, let me put it in a little different.
Wait a minute. Where do you see that? That's actually in the Health and Safety Code. That's not in our ordinance. That's statutorily mandated.
Well, I'm looking at the Health and Safety Code, and it doesn't say anything about that they have to live in the same city.
This is not the forum to be discussing legal. I know you disagree on a legal basis with our legal analysis, but
whether we like it or not, we're not here to legislate.
Part of it is, and it was based on the fact that he said that transportation of marijuana is illegal. And I responded, if it's illegal, then why are these people doing it now?
I'm sorry, could you be more clear to me?
Well, I'm not at all satisfied that look at the charter. It indicates that the city attorney's office passes on the legality of every ordinance that you undertake. And so that when I draw up an ordinance, I'm basically putting my imprimatur on it, saying that I believe it's legal. Now, you can disagree with me.
It's against federal law to transport across state lines.
All of this is against federal law. 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 The city attorney's office passes on the legality of every ordinance. All of this is against federal law.
But I think that it is our duty to separate the thought of and the fun that we make of the 60s and, you know, what pot smoking was all about back then, and looking at it as a medication.
And if he's not doing his, I mean, he should be doing his job, and if in fact they're transporting it now, then they should all be closed down, or at least they should all be arrested for transporting it. It has to get to the collective. How it's transported, who transports it, and who grows it. I mean, these are questions that you're asking us to answer now. I just don't know what reason, you're not giving us any.
No, I've already explained it.
No, this is enough.
Now, transportation, if we go to the California Health and Safety Code, 11362.775 says that qualified patients, persons with valid identification cards, and the designated primary caregivers of qualified patients and persons with identification cards who associate within the state of California in order collectively or cooperatively to cultivate marijuana for medical purposes, and here's the place, shall not solely on the basis of that fact be subject to state criminal sanctions under section, and it lists about 6 sections. I'm really focusing on section 11360. And that states, A, except as otherwise provided by this section or as authorized by law, and it's talking about the transportation of drugs. So I think that the transportation issue is covered already.
Well,
regardless of what the district attorney said, it's covered already.
Well, we do disagree. I mean, I don't think this is the forum to get into a legal argument. I'm sure Crystal Meyer would be happy to respond to you.
I'm sure she would. But my question, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the law. It was copied out of the.
We'll respond. Crystal, would you care to respond?
Yes, Councilwoman Gabelich. In fact, the issue is that was raised. There are distinctions here. The law only
illegal in the state of, in your definition of the safety code within the state of California, then how are we legalizing it within the city of Long Beach?
In fact, what is before you comports with the code section. That is why, in the case of Trippett, what you're asking is why the reasonable distance, I imagine, is why in the city of Long Beach, if there were 2, that actually was addressed, a distribution center and a cultivation. The courts expressed that would be factored in to whether or not the affirmative immunity. Well, you're looking, with all due respect, Councilwoman, only at one section of the Medical Marijuana Program Act.
The issue, if I could interrupt.
I believe that we should be supporting our state law.
The iteration you've suggested doesn't limit it to the state of California. It could come from out of the country.
No. That's not true.
It is against federal law to transport across state
Okay,
lines.
Mr. Vice Mayor Lurch, you do not have the floor.
I do. It's against federal law to transport across state lines.
All of this is against federal law.
So I think a lot of discussion has evolved around the transportation of this, but clearly the California State Penal Code identifies where that is allowable and where it's not.
And I'm not satisfied that that is a legal term of the ordinance. We're going to have to look at it further. It's my decision to make under the charter, and I have to do that, and I will do that.
Excuse me, I still have the floor, that they would lose their funding, first of all. And secondly, you know what? They haven't even been successful in eliminating drugs from within the schools. I don't know why she's amending something she's not even supporting, so it's kind of ridiculous.
Well,
Let alone 1,000 feet from the school. And if they would work on that instead of trying to influence city policy.
But I'm here to tell you that we have the will in this council, I believe, to make sure that we get medical marijuana to patients who need it. And I don't see why we are now changing the rule. Okay, Mr. Shannon, what did you say was inadvertently missed?
And I'll determine whether or not I'm going to draw the ordinance up. So you go
The
ahead.
whole thing seems pretty much like a sham to me, and let's be very clear. The purpose of this ordinance is to put you guys out of business. I think that having an insufficient, incomplete, or an illogical ordinance is just not the way to go, and so I'll be voting no.